Hi everyone, today I'm going to be walking you through kind of a beginner's guide to how to get started with keybinding in World of Warcraft. Keybinding is one of the topics we covered in my video on how to be a better World of Warcraft player, which if you haven't seen that, I will link that in the description below for you. And keybinding is definitely one of those features in WoW that just takes your gameplay to the next level, but I think for a lot of beginners or people who aren't as familiar with MMOs in general, kind of feel a little bit overwhelmed by them because they don't really know how to approach them. So I thought we could go through my own personal keybinds together and I can explain to you which ones I use and why, and maybe give you some tips and tricks on how to improve your own keybinds as well. As always, if you see anything in this video that you're not really 100% sure about, please feel free to leave a comment below and I will do my very best to help you. And of course, if I don't mention something about keybindings that you think is useful and that you have experience with, again, feel free to leave a comment below and people can hopefully benefit from it. So here we are with my main character, and what I have gone and done is set her keybinds back to Blizzard default, because I want to just start from the ground and work up and kind of go through each keybind one by one and explain it to you. So let's go ahead and open the keybindings, which you can go and quick keybind through the edit mode. If you click on an action bar, you have an option here to quick keybind, and that will let you run through each keybind and just hover over it and press the key that you want to assign to it, and it will do that for you. But I think for the purposes of this video right now, we're going to actually go straight into the actual keybinding menu because we have lots of things we need to unassign first, if that makes sense. So my first tip for starting off with keybinds is to head into your movement keys and unassign your turn left and turn right keys, because let me show you the difference between turning and strafing. So this character has the default keybind, so if I press A, for example, which you can see on the screen, it will highlight whenever I press a key, my character will turn on the spot, and if I run forward, so hold W and turn, she will just run in a circle. Turning left and turning right in this game don't really serve much of a purpose, and to be honest, I've played without them for so long and I have never been in a situation where I needed to turn left or right. So what we're going to do is head back to the keybindings menu, and where it says strafe left and strafe right, we're basically going to cut and paste the A and D keys into here instead. So my strafe left is going to be A and my strafe right is going to be D. That then unassigns my turn left and turn right keys, and now if I press A or hold A, my character will run left as opposed to turning on the spot left. You see how much more useful that is? So that is the first tip I would give you, is to unassign your turn left and turn right and dedicate everything to strafing. Another two movement keys we are going to unbind for the purposes of making your rotational abilities more comfortable are sit or move down and sheath or unsheath your weapon. These two don't really have much of a use. I mean, sheath and unsheath weapon is basically for role players. As for sit or move down, this is a little bit more important because you can use it, for example, where it says move down, that's usable in water. It's usable in the air if you're on a flying mount that's not a dragon riding mount. But for the purposes of this video, I'm also going to unassign this. One of the last little keybinds I'm going to unbind is the toggle character pane keybind, which is by default C. You can use the micro menu in the bottom right of your screen to open your character pane, or you could just bind it to something a little bit more complicated so that you don't accidentally open it mid-fight, or just generally so you can assign something more important to the letter C. So something I like to do is actually, rather than toggling it to C, I just toggle it to Shift C. The last two kind of interface keybinds that I like to change are the toggle chat pane, which essentially is the in-game voice chat feature. I use this for my rotation, so we unbind this. You don't technically have to go through and do what I'm doing here and physically unbind each key that you don't want to put somewhere else. If I just go and put T where I actually want it, the toggle chat pane will automatically unassign T from it. But for the purposes of this, we're going to unassign. The other thing I like to unassign is the PvP pane, because I don't really PvP and the default keybind for it is H. I can just go and open that elsewhere. You can open it by using the group finder toggle and then just moving along to the PvP pane. You can access all of these different tabs just through I, So for me, it doesn't really make a huge difference. And again, I use H as part of my rotation. Once you go through the process of unbinding the Blizzard keybinds, you realize just how much more space and freedom you have on your keyboard. For example, we've freed up the letters Q, E, R, and T across the top of your keyboard, just under the numbers. You've also got F, G, and H, which I like to use as well. And then across the bottom, you have Z, X, C, and V. And if you've got bigger hands, you can broaden that out even further if you wanted to. I just kind of like to keep basically the first half of my keyboard nice and free for all of my core combat abilities. So now we can actually get into the bulk of the key bindings, where I'm going to walk you through what I actually do assign and why. And the way I like to do it personally is kind of breaking up all of my abilities on my action bar based on what their function is. So for example, you have core rotational abilities, so abilities that you need to be using all of the time. So on a balanced druid, I have Moonfire and Sunfire. Sometimes I even have Stellar Flare, but for now we're working with just 2 dots. So I need to be able to quickly and easily reapply those throughout a fight. I have filler abilities or builders, for example, Wrath and Starfire. I need those to be really comfortable as well. And then I have 2 Astral Power Spenders, Star Surge and Starfall. They also need to be comfortable. Then I have keybinds for things like major cooldowns that need to be in a slightly different place from my core rotation so I don't accidentally hit them when I don't mean to. So for me as a druid, I have Celestial Alignment as my major cooldown. It's a 3-minute cooldown with the talents I'm running. And as a troll, I also have Berserking, which is a short personal haste buff that I also get. Now, I can actually save a keybind here because I can just macro Berserking into Celestial Alignment so that when I pop CA, I also get Berserking at the same time. The other thing that I have a lot as a druid are lots of movement speed, for example. Innovate, Nature's Vigil, Swift Mend, and Rejuvenate, as well as my 2 Resurrects, so a Battle Res and a generic Revive. And then down at the bottom, I have, again, more utility. There's some defensives in there. We have a Silence, a Knockback, a defensive, a soothe, an incap, a vortex, root. I have another heal down here, another heal down here, and then this is where we get into like potions, healthstone, and then a gateway control shard, which if you don't know what this is, you can buy it from the Artisans Consortium vendor in Valdrakken. It will essentially allow you to use a demonic gateway if you are close enough to it without having to actually physically click on the gateway, because in certain boss fights it can be a bit hectic trying to find the gateway to press it. So if you just assign it to a keybind, as long as you're close enough to the gateway, it will let you use it, which is much more efficient. So let's start going through each keybind, or each block of keybind, and we'll talk about why I assign them the way I do. I actually keep the first 5 of these, but then when I get to Starfall, I prefer to use Tab. Then next to it I have CA. Because CA is a major cooldown, I put it somewhere away from the rest of these numbers so I don't accidentally hit it. So my default keybind for CA is G. Then we have a potion. This is a combat potion, so it has a good cooldown on it, so you can only usually use it once, maybe twice in a fight. Because of that, because I'm not going to use it very much, I want to put it on a more complex keybind. That way it makes room for the other keybinds that I'm going to use way more often. The keybind that's stuck in my head, I can't really tell you why, is Control 4. This is an example of a control keybind, meaning if I press 4 without holding any buttons down, I'm going to cast Starfire, which is down here on number 4. But if I hold Control and press 4, I'm going to use my combat potion instead. I have Wild Charge here, which I have keybound to 7, and also on my MMO mouse too. So I can press them, I can press either and both of them will perform the same function. My sprint is, again, I don't use it very often, but it is something that I need to kind of have as a panic button to move out of a mechanic if I don't have time. I prefer a shift keybind here. So I hold shift and press my middle mouse button down, my scroll wheel. I can physically press it down. That will immediately shift me into cat form, which is very handy to have, and will apply the dash immediately, which is very handy. Stampeding Roar is a very nice cooldown to have for your group. I put this on a shift 5. You see how these movement abilities are a bit more niche and a bit more nuanced, therefore their keybinds are naturally going to be a little bit more complicated, but they're still all pretty comfortable for me to press. Then we have Flap. Flap is a little bit strange and very, very niche, but I just kind of have a universal keybind for any slowfall ability in my head. So Mage's slowfall, Priest's levitate, and Moonkin's flap. They all just go on Alt middle mouse button. Next up we have Innovate. Innovate I classify as one of those abilities that gives utility to another player. And again, I have universalized that keybind in my head, which is Shift 3. Nature's Vigil is quite a nice ability to have, and again, its utility on a 1.5 minute cooldown. I like to have this on a pretty comfortable key, so I just use V for this. Then we have a couple of heals along the bar, so Swift Mend and Rejuvenate. I put these in a pretty similar place. Swift Mend goes on number 9, and the same on my mouse, and Rejuvenate goes on number 8, and the same on my mouse. Next we have a battle res. This one's really important because, kind of similar to the combat potion, you won't be using it very often because you can only use it however many times in a fight anyway, but you need to be able to have it somewhere that allows you to use it in an emergency. So I have this on Alt A. Solar Beam is a very important ability because it's an interrupt, so remember we unbound the turning left and turning right. We've already used the E key, now I'm going to use the Q key because interrupts are just very, very important, albeit a Moonkin's silence is 1 minute of a cooldown, so you do have quite a lot of downtime when you can't use it, but I still like to have it somewhere pretty comfortable. Barkskin is my personal defensive, one of the only ones I do have. I put this on the key next to your number 1 on your keyboard, like the kind of apostrophe looking thing, the inverted apostrophe. I'm going to be honest, I don't know what that punctuation is called. Incap Roar is another CC. I put this one on Shift 7. Entangling Roots is a pretty nice ability to have. It doesn't have a cooldown, so I put this on the minus, which is across the top of your keys, next to your numbers, and apply that to my MMO mouse too. So now we have pretty much an entire action bar grid full of all of the keybinds I need to perform my function in a raid or a Mythic Plus environment, for example, including rotational abilities, major cooldowns, defensives, group utility, potions, health potions like instant heals, all that kind of thing. You may also notice I do have a little tool shelf in the bottom right of my screen here, and this has all of my kind of like buffs, for example, so my Mark of the Wild as a druid. I also have my feasts here, so food buffs, I have my files, I have my runes, and I have some drums too. I also like to keep a Hearthstone interface. This is the Tome of Teleportation add-on that will give you an interface of all of the possible Hearthstones and different teleports your character can use. I will link that add-on in the description if you'd like to download it for yourself. I also have a mailbox toy here, so I can just really easily summon a mailbox. So with all of that, we have unassigned a bunch of the pretty useless default Blizzard keybinds and replaced them with ones that make more sense to us, which I think is step number 1 in kind of improving your gameplay. You can see here the button should be illuminating on screen which ones I am pressing. Obviously, we're fighting training dummies here. There's only so many abilities I can use or need to use. You can see how the majority of my keys are nice and comfortable. I have everything I need nicely situated, nice and central to my movement keys. Because when you think about key bindings in the context of actually, playing the game, so even in open world content, but specifically in Raid and Mythic Plus, you need to be able to be moving pretty freely. And if you have keybinds that you need to be pressing at the same time that are in a really difficult to reach place, you're going to struggle to multitask like that, and it's probably going to impact your gameplay. So that is pretty much it. I hope that this video helped you kind of get familiar with how to keybind in World of Warcraft, whether you are a beginner just looking into keybinding for the first time, or whether you just needed a little bit of advice or some tips on how best to set up keybinds for yourself. With time and with practice, play around with your keybinds and just start to kind of commit to them so that then they stick. If you're constantly changing around your keybinds, you're never really gonna find any that work specifically for you, because inevitably it doesn't really matter which keybinds you're using. If you just run them over and over again, you will eventually just learn them kind of like muscle memory. Thank you so much for watching today, and if you enjoyed the video, please do give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you would like to see more content like this from me in the future. Thanks again for watching, best of luck with your keybinds, and I hope to catch you again soon. Bye!